This is Sports Bash Saturday with Josh Hennig, live from the Matt Blatt Kia Studios. Now, Sports Bash Saturday. Here's Josh Hennig.
Happy New Year, South Jersey, day 2 of 2021. So far, it's not too bad. We'll get to the Eagles as well. I got some thoughts to say about Jalen Hurts and Carson Wentz heading into the final game of the season and what the future holds for both those guys. But right now, we're going to get some Sixers conversation because joining us right now on the Boardwalk Kind of Hotline. You can check out his latest article over at 973ESPN.com. Things to watch for in tonight's Sixers game versus Charlotte. He is Kevin McCormick, our 97.3 ESPN Sixers beat writer. Check out his work at 973ESPN.com and the 973 ESPN mobile app. He joins us right now on Sports Bash Saturday. Kevin, how you doing today?
Josh, I'm doing good, man. How are you?
Doing pretty good. Of course, the Sixers got these back-to-back with the Hornets coming up, but I think a lot of people, they were feeling pretty good about themselves, New Year's Eve night, because I think we saw the version of the team that Doc Rivers and Daryl Morey envisioned all along with this roster, which was a team that has the shooters to space the floor. And you got a little surprise added in there with a shot made 3 from Ben Simmons and a couple from Matisse Thybulle. So, at least it looks like if this team can play the way they did Thursday night, this is a team to be reckoned with.
Yeah, it definitely looks like things are starting to come together on the offensive side of the ball. I mean, defensively, they've been amazing from the start, but the three-point shooting finally coming out is a great sign just because we'll finally get to see how this team looks with the proper spacing with the additions that they made in the offseason. Although Embiid's already had, more than enough room to work with around the rim and in the mid-range and stuff, having the shooters making their shots, we saw it a little bit in the Knicks game, just completely opens the floor for the Sixers. So moving forward, if they can stay hot and continue to shoot the ball even close to how they shot against Orlando, I'm very excited for what it's going to do for the spacing of guys like Joel Embiid, Ben Simmons, and Tobias Harris.
Let's touch on the two big names on the team. First, let's start with Simmons. I've been very frustrated with him in the first few games. And, his one three-pointer aside, to me, I just feel like this guy, I don't know if he's still trying to figure out his teammates. I don't know if he's overthinking, but the turnovers bother me, Kevin. I could care less about if he shoots the three or not. I want him to make free throws. I want him to attack the basket. I want him to be assertive on offense. I don't like the turnovers. The turnovers bother me a lot. Why is he turning over the ball as much as he has?
I would have to say a lot of it just has to go with, the new moving parts. A lot of these new guys that are coming in, Seth Curry's brought it up multiple times that this team is still kind of working through the kinks of where they want everyone to be on the floor as the offense, goes through a set. So part of it's just, finding guys in different spots or guys not being used to play with him yet. We saw the one game where Danny Green was flying down the wing in transition and Ben flung it basically the length of the court to him and airmailed over Danny Green's head because he kind of slowed up, not anticipating that pass from Simmons. So I think as these guys get more comfortable, that number should go down. And mainly, it's just the growing pains. We knew stuff like this was going to happen where the offense was just, still finding its way to work its way out.
Kevin McCormick joining us here, Sixers beat writer for 97.3 ESPN.com. Here in the Boardwalk Kind of Hotline on 97.3 ESPN. You can follow him on Twitter for all your Sixers coverage at KevinMCC973. Kevin, you mentioned also about the parts. And I mean this in a big picture thing. One of my concerns with Simmons is I understand they're all working together. They're trying to get better. And I'm not saying I hate Ben Simmons. I'm not one of these people who's saying, trade him, I hate him. But there's a part of me that's wondering, the fact that he has developed so slowly has to make me wonder, is he ever going to reach his potential in a Sixers uniform?
I think you will. I mean, it's just, obviously it's not coming at the pace that most people would want. But you also need to account for the fact that since he's been here, this roster continues to change. I think with a little bit of stability, it's kind of hard for a guy who's so pass first like him to really find his comfort level when he has to readjust to a new supporting cast with him every, the 6 months. So although come at a very slow pace on that, it's a nice event since he's entered the league. He's a borderline defensive player of the year candidate, and he's arguably the most versatile defender in the NBA right now.
Can that style of play, though, help this team win a championship? Can you win a championship with Ben Simmons just being a great defensive player, a guy who's setting up his teammates, getting a closer triple-double every night? Can you win a championship with him doing that and leaning on Joel Embiid to carry you in crunch time?
It'd be tough. I think it's still so soon to say with this group, but arguably, I mean, the real main thing you would like to see is more scoring from him. And although his scoring numbers have been down these past 2 games, part of it I think is just because of he's just been feeding the hot hand in recent games. Obviously, it was Tobias Harris against the Raptors, Seth Curry against Orlando. So I guess he could be more assertive as a scorer. He's been getting to the line more, which is, I feel like, has been a very underrated thing. As of right now, he's on pace to have a career high in free throw attempts per game. The percentage has dipped a little bit, but he is getting there. I think as this team gets rolling more, and even with more improved spacing, with guys knocking down their shots, with him getting more lanes to the rim, hopefully we do see the much-needed bump in scoring that people have been asking for.
The guy that I'm looking for a little more scoring from, and he's given it to the Sixers in the last couple of games at least, is Tobias Harris. Because if I had $1 for every time I've heard someone bring up Tobias Harris's contract in the last year, I'd be doing pretty well, Kevin. Let me put it that way. Like this, I can't avoid a person when they talk about the Sixers who bring up Tobias Harris's contract. And no matter how many times I explain to people that everybody in the NBA is overpaid, nobody wants to hear it. So to me, if Tobias can go out there and score and be a consistent guy to get around 20 points a night, go out there and go 4 for 6 like he did against Cleveland, even though there's a loss, or 3 for 4 against Orlando, or 2 for 5. If he's doing that each and every night, number one, it's going to make a lot of these people who complain about him quiet down a little bit. But the other thing is, I think it makes the team better because now you're forcing opponents to focus on someone who's not Joel Embiid at a consistent level, who's playing a style of basketball that realistically I think fits in well with Ben and Joel when he's on.
Yeah, he's been great. He's looked so confident in these last stretch of games. Like you said, even with his improved shooting, it's opening his game as well, just because what we saw in the Raptors game a lot was when he was knocking down his threes, his pump fake became much more lethal. He's getting defenders off his feet. That was allowing him to attack the lane and either, stop at the elbow and hit a nice mid-range jumper and get all the way to the rim, dump it to Joel, to Ben. I completely agree. His skill set when he's on is a perfect complement to Embiid and Simmons, and he can, without a doubt, be a legitimate third option for this team.
What do you think is Tobias Harris's potential? Because, we talk about Ben Simmons, but people forget that Tobias Harris isn't exactly old either. He's 28 years old. He's basically entering the prime of his career right now. So we know he's under contract for another few years. For all the people who want to get rid of him, like, get rid of this guy. But I say, I want to know, what is this guy's potential? I want to know, what is Tobias Harris's ceiling? Because if his ceiling is something that is going to be as good as I think it can be, I'm personally not interested in trading him, Kevin.
Yeah, he's been great. I've been a very, pro Tobias guy since he's been here. But in terms of his ceiling, last year he gave you just under 20 points on league average shooting. So with this Doc Rivers system, if his ceiling is close to how Doc had him playing in LA, I would say that's a great ceiling. He was a plus 20 point per game guy, shot over 40% from three, gave you a handful of rebounds, handful of assists. So if he can hit, even that type of level here, I would say that's a more than solid ceiling for him and makes him a key piece for the Sixers for years to come.
Kevin McCormick has his 3 things to watch for in tonight's Sixers versus Hornets game. You can read the full article right now on 97.3 ESPN.com and the 97.3 ESPN mobile app. You can follow Kevin on Twitter at KevinMCC973 for all your Sixers coverage joining us right now on the Boardwalk on the hotline on 97.3 ESPN. Kevin, the other thing I'm interested to see with this team going forward is, man, Shake Milton's looked really good. And I thought he would be good. I didn't think he'd be this good. I think that he's exceeded everyone's expectations. And, I know it was a bit of a tough thing with Korkmaz going down because it's part of the rotation, but if you can get some production out of Thibault, he can get in the lineup, he can give you some defense. If you can get that consistent play from Shake Milton on both ends of the court, this team, with Dwight Howard and Mike Scott, they may have a way deeper bench than people really realize. Because you look around the other teams in the Eastern Conference, Boston, they don't have the depth they used to. Washington, they're falling apart at the seams. The only two teams that legitimately have depth, aside from the Sixers, in my eyes, are what? The Bucks and the Heat?
Yeah, I mean, it's up there. I mean, Brooklyn was, I would say, would have been in that conversation up until they lost Dinwiddie. But, yeah, Shake Milton's been phenomenal. When the season started, looking at the roster, one thing that really stood out to me was just how many playable guys the Sixers had on a nightly basis, which will be a good sign as the year goes on, especially with, load management and things like that. Having so many guys that can come in and give you solid contribution on a nightly basis is just a great thing to have. Like you said, Matisse Thybulle, if he can continue to play how he played against Orlando, I think he for sure locks in a spot in the rotation, even with Korkmaz back. And Milton himself, he's been phenomenal as a scorer, as a shooter. He's definitely built on the campaign that he had last year. But the main thing that stood out to me for him has been his defense. I mean, Doc said before the year that he was going to hold Shake accountable on that side of the ball, and Shake seems to be fully bought in. I mean, on the opening night of the season, he did a great job defending Bradley Beal. His defense overall has been great. So if he can continue to give you that and really turn himself into like a Lou Will-ish type player and be a super sub for the Sixers, I agree. He can be a great piece.
Kevin, what is something that you are most surprised about with this Sixers team in the handful of games so far this year?
It's tough. I love the pace so far. I mean, it's great to see them playing a modernized offense, but I'd say the biggest surprise has just been how great defensively they've been from the beginning. I mean, obviously they were going to be a good defensive team with Joel Embiid and Ben Simmons kind of leading that charge, but I think having those two type of players who pride themselves on that side of the ball has almost made defense contagious on this roster, and so many players seem to be bought in and improved on that side of the ball. So just how great of a defensive powerhouse they've been this year would arguably have to be my biggest surprise or takeaway.
You can check out more from Kevin McCormick's coverage over at 97.3 ESPN.com. 3 things to watch for tonight's Sixers versus Hornets game. You can follow him on Twitter at KevinMCC973. Kevin, I want to ask you a couple of general NBA questions before I let you go, because to me, I try to look at the rest of the league. I try to actually not just focus on the team here in Philadelphia. I feel that there's context to be had. And as I'm watching the league, I'm noticing 2 things going on right now. I'm noticing a lot of teams not playing good defense, and I'm noticing a lot of teams not playing efficient offense. And the reason I bring that up is because I think if the Sixers can get their defense ratcheted up night in and night out, they may be able to give themselves a little cushion in terms of the win-loss standings in the Eastern Conference. So when teams do figure out their teams a little bit better down the road, when they make trades down the road, the Sixers will have a nice little cushion before the playoffs hit in the second half of the season.
Yeah, being this strong on the defensive side of the ball definitely does give them an edge. Just because even last year when Brett Brown was here and they had their roster with Josh Richardson and Al Horford, they talked about, just wearing teams down on defense and being like a stronghold on that side of the ball. And it looks like all of those statements have been brought this season as opposed to last season. So I agree. Just being that strong on defense has given them that, I guess, that comfort zone to work through your offensive growth, just because of getting guys like Curry and Green integrated. But I mean, overall, through the entire NBA, there definitely have been some non-defensive standings, like that Brooklyn-Atlanta game that finished with both teams breaking near 140. So, listen, defense wins championships, and having guys like Simmons and Embiid is going to be crucial down the stretch.
The other thing I wanted to ask you about going around the league, and that is there seems to be a lot of good teams early on, but one could argue part of that is the way the schedule is playing out. And I have to wonder, is there going to be a possibility as we go along through the months? Because there's that big gap in the middle of the year now between the first, second half. They're going to use that gap to kind of recalibrate the schedule. I kind of have to wonder, are the Sixers going to be in a position, if they can keep this up, to maybe get a solid, maybe 4 seed kind of situation, and they might actually be in a way better matchup than people thought because there might be teams behind them fighting for slots in that second half? Could that be to the Sixers' advantage if they can have a cohesive unit while the rest of the Eastern Conference is clamoring? Because I'm looking around and I see, okay, the Hawks, they're fun to watch, but they're not a top 3 team in the East. To me, I look around the Eastern Conference, it's the Bucks, it's the Heat, and it's everybody else. And I got to look at teams like Boston with lack of depth. I look at the Nets with a lack of depth. If Durant or Kyrie go down for any number of games, they're going to struggle. We saw that game versus Memphis. They didn't have John Morant, and Karis LeVert had a huge game, and they still couldn't win.
Mm-hmm. And heading into this season, I had the Sixers locked into that 3 seed. Although Miami brought back most of their core, and they still have a lot of playable guys as well, I think the Sixers could realistically jump them in the standings. The way I looked at it was it's Milwaukee and Brooklyn above, just because obviously with 2-time reigning MVP Giannis Antetokounmpo and the Durant-Irving mix thriving early. I would say that those are the 2 teams I really put ahead of the Sixers. But listen, their first half of the schedule favors them greatly. We've seen it so far and how they're off to the 4-1 start. They have a lot of easy games in the first half of this season. If they can just continue to build on this momentum and beat the teams that they're supposed to beat, it would, without a doubt, can give them a nice cushion at the top of the Eastern Conference and make their playoff road a little easier in the second half once we see what the schedule is going to look like for them.
Again, check out all of his coverage at 973ESPN.com, the 973 ESPN mobile app. 3 things to watch for. Also, he catches post-game wrap-ups after every Sixers game on the website. He is Kevin McCormick, our Sixers beat writer for 973 ESPN.com. As all guests, he appeared on the Boardwalk on the hotline. Follow him on Twitter at KevinMCC973. Great stuff today, Kevin.
Thanks, Josh. Take care.
This is Sports Bash Saturday with Josh Hennig, live from the Matt Blatt Kia Studios. Here's Josh Hennig.
12 o'clock hours, Sports Bash Saturday being brought to you by GMS Law. Make the right call with 4 convenient locations to serve you. Visit them online at gmslaw.com. We'll give you my sports, football, and other sports picks for the weekend coming up in the next hour, plus my conversation with Adam Rittenberg, ESPN.com, senior college football writer and reporter. Well, we got to get to this Eagles breaking news right now. This just came down while Kevin McCormick and I were talking in the last segment. Tom Pelissero is the first to report this from NFL Network. I'm seeing that Tim McManus has confirmed the report for ESPN.com. Eagles defensive coordinator Jim Schwartz intends to allow his contract to expire, and he plans to take a year off from coaching in 2021 as he contemplates retirement. Now, that's a twist. I know a lot of people were wondering, if someone was going to lose their job this offseason. Well, it seems like Schwartz is preemptive striking this. According to Tom Pelissero, Schwartz, who's 54 years old, has told those close to him that he will contemplate retirement after a 32-year coaching career, including 28 in the NFL, and after he won a Super Bowl 3 years ago with the Eagles. I mean, this is just wild. So this brings a whole new context to what Schwartz said this week to the media. So Schwartz said when he met with the media this week that the defense is going to have a no-hat rule this Sunday. That the Eagles' defense wants to deny Washington a chance to win the NFC East. I might have to flip my whole opinion about this game tomorrow. If this Eagles defense knows that Schwartz is considering not just retiring, but to let his contract expire and walk away from the game altogether, they might play their tails off for him tomorrow night. They may just pin their ears back and say, to heck with the organization. Schwartz is our guy. Because let's not forget, despite all the injuries, despite everything that's happened this year, the Eagles have been top 5 in the NFL in sacks, quarterback hurries, and quarterback hits. They have been one of the best pressure defenses in the NFL, despite the mediocre play from their linebackers and the poor play from their secondary at times as well. During his time with the Philadelphia Eagles from 2016 to this year, Jim Schwartz has had a team that has been top 10 against the run. Not just once, not just twice, but for the last 5 years. Overall, the defense has allowed yards at times, but outside of this year, the only other year that they've been 20 or worse in allowing total yards was 2018. Over the last 5 years, this is how Jim Schwartz's defense have ranked in total yards allowed. 13th in 2016, 4th in 2017, 23rd in 2018, 10th in 2019, 21st this year. In points per game allowed, here's what Schwartz's rankings have been. 13th in 2016, 12th in 2016, 4th in 2017, 12th in 2018, 15th in 2019, 22nd this year. So that means he is at a top 15 defense every year in allowing points per game until this year. That's incredible. That's wild. But yet people hate on the guy. I gotta have to wonder, did this season wear him out? Did all of the injuries and there's reports out there that Schwartz wanted them to get some legitimate linebackers in free agency in the draft, and they gave him Davion Taylor, and he was not happy about it. There's a lot of reports that, about Schwartz basically just, maybe being a little burnt out, maybe. Maybe that has something to do with this. You don't just let your contract expire if you still want to coach. He's taking a year off from coaching, contemplating retirement. That means maybe he just burned out. Maybe he's just done. Just wild breaking news coming down. Get to your text here, 609-403-0973 on the PlaySugarHouse.com text. How do you feel about this? Jim Schwartz, according to reports, going to let his contract expire at the end of the year. He's going to walk away from the game of football for at least a year while he considers retirement altogether after a 32-year coaching career. During his time in Philadelphia, Jim Schwartz's defense have been top 15 in the NFL in points per game allowed, and for the last 5 years, he's at a top 10 rushing defense for the last 5 years. They were top 5 in the NFL this year in sacks, quarterback hurries, and quarterback hits. That's Jim Schwartz's defense. Wow. Absolutely incredible. The guy is just going to be like, I'm done with football. I'm telling you, man, I really think that this defense now is just going to go out there and go nuts tomorrow. Get your text here, 609-403-0973. 609-403-0973. Dan from EH says, wow, Schwartz finally got sick of the fans bashing him, so he's going to retire. The defense should be motivated a lot because of this. The defense should have been motivated a lot sooner than this, what Dan said. Well, Dan, the problem with the defense this year was that Jim Schwartz was playing with half a deck. They didn't give him any legitimate linebackers. The best linebacker on the team is Alex Singleton. Nate Gary's an embarrassment. TJ Edwards is a bit one-dimensional. Duke Riley is more of a better special teams guy than an actual linebacker. Davion Taylor was always considered a project coming out of college. He's supposed to be a good linebacker in 3 years, not on year one. So you didn't give him any legitimate linebackers. When you let Malcolm Jenkins leave, you didn't really replace Malcolm with anyone except for Will Parks. And you cut Will Parks halfway through the season. You could have used Will Parks in the last 2 weeks with all the injuries, like Rodney McLeod out for the season. But no, you had to cut Will Parks. You took another player away from Schwartz. I don't think the defense was not motivated this year. In fact, the defense did some pretty good work this year at times. I mean, when they did have a couple of bad games, Schwartz said, I did horrible. This is why we did bad. The players rallied behind him, and they played well in the next game. you're not top 5 in the NFL in sacks, quarterback hurries, quarterback hits if the defense isn't motivated. They just don't have the depth and the manpower after all the injuries and the fact that the front office doesn't care about prioritizing linebackers and secondary. They loaded all this money into the defensive line with Malik Jackson, Fletcher Cox, Javon Hargrave, Brandon Graham. They spent all these draft picks on guys like Barnett and Josh Sweat on the defensive line. They've given him nothing when it comes to linebackers, and the best cornerback he's had in Philadelphia is Darius Slay. They traded for him. They couldn't even draft a cornerback. Listen, maybe there's something to the fact that Schwartz is just tired of the media. He's tired of the fans. He's tired of the political minutia in the building. Maybe Schwartz is just tired. 609-403-0973. Jeff from Summers Point chimes in to the show and says, I thought Jim Schwartz was pretty young, too. This is nuts. He should have taken a head coaching job when we won the Super Bowl. A couple things. So Schwartz is currently 54 years old. So that means he's 16 years younger than Pete Carroll. Just to give you a little context. Pete Carroll's around 70 years old. So Jim Schwartz, in football terms, he's a young coach. So you're right, Jeff. He is a young guy in terms of football terms. I don't know if he was going to get a head coaching job, though, after the Super Bowl. There was a huge stigma against him after his last 2 stops in the NFL, because if you remember, he led the Lions to their first playoff appearance when he was coaching there in like 15 years. But the team struggled to consistently perform from week to week. And there was a lot of criticism that Schwartz couldn't build a good coaching staff. The theory was that the players played hard for him, but he couldn't build a good enough staff when it came to, the offensive coaching staff, his defensive coaches under him, because there are a lot of people who believe that his defense has underperformed at times in Detroit, and that in games they needed the win to get them into the postseason or in their one postseason game, that the team just wasn't prepared enough, and that there's a lot of criticism that, he didn't build the kind of relationships he needed to over the years to build a coaching staff as a head coach. And then, remember, he had that 1 year in Buffalo before Rex Ryan came in and cleaned house, because Rex Ryan and Jim Schwartz have completely opposite defenses. Jim Schwartz has the wide 9-4-3. Rex Ryan runs that 3-4 hybrid, blitzing linebacker defense. So he wanted nothing to do with Jim Schwartz. They could have never got along anyway. But the Schwartz's 1 year in Buffalo, they were a top 5 defense in the NFL. And Rex Ryan did a worse job with the defense that Schwartz made a top 5 defense. That defense was plummeting year after year under Rex Ryan, part of the reason why he got fired. So when he got hired in Philadelphia, it was kind of like his last chance to really prove himself, because there was a lot of opinions around the league that, he couldn't get along with certain people. There were theories out there that, he was just a certain kind of personality. And we find out in Philadelphia that he's actually a guy that the players play hard for. He's somebody who, other people like in the building. He's a very well-liked guy in Philadelphia. He's a little stubborn and hard-headed, but most good coaches are. He's not a Hall of Fame coach, but he's definitely a good enough coach to help you win a Super Bowl, get you to the playoffs for 3 years in a row with Doug Peterson. Again, Jim Schwartz, according to Tom Pelissaro of NFL Network, and confirmed by Tim McManus of ESPN, Jim Schwartz will be letting his contract expire after this year, take a year off from coaching as he considers retirement at 54 years old, a 32-year coaching career, 28 in the NFL. And, of course, he was one of the people who was part of the Eagles winning their first Super Bowl in franchise history. Keep the text coming, 609-403-0970. Good stuff from Jeff in Summers Point, Dan, EHT. I'll get to Jason and Kate May's text coming up the other side, because he asked a question about Jalen Hurts that I want to get to as well. Don't forget, coming up on 97.3 ESPN, Rutgers basketball. Rutgers, top 25 team in the country with Ron Harper Jr. taking on Luka Garza in Iowa, coming up at 2 o'clock here on 97.3 ESPN, followed by, to me, the best college football game of the day, the Fiesta Bowl, Oregon versus Iowa State, followed by Sixers basketball, Sixers versus Hornets, followed by the Orange Bowl in progress, North Carolina versus Texas A&M. all the action, quadruple header of sports action right here on 97.3 ESPN, your home for Eagles, Sixers, and Flyers, as well as college football, national championship, and the Super Bowl.
This is Sports Bash Saturday with Josh Hennig, live from the Matt Blatt Kia Studios. Now, Sports Bash Saturday. Here's Josh Hennig.
Welcome back in the second hour of Sports Bash Saturday here on 97.3 ESPN. A busy sports weekend. Hope you're all having a great weekend. Happy New Year 2021. Still to come on the show, Adam Rittenberg, ESPN College Football Writer and Reporter. Joining us to recap the college football playoff semifinals, which you heard right here on 97.3 ESPN yesterday. Ohio State versus Alabama will be for the college football national championship. So Adam and I will talk more about that coming up about 20 minutes from now. With your text this hour as well at 609-403-0973. Don't forget the second hour of Sports Bash Saturday being brought to you by my friends over at weightliftinghq.com. 2021 is here, and you don't want to let another day go by without trying to find a way to help you meet your health and fitness goals. 2020 was rough on all of us. So whether you're someone who wants to get back in the shape, but you're not sure if you're comfortable going to the gym and you want to just work out from home, or maybe you've been going to the gym, but because work has got you stuck at home as well, it's hard for you to get out of the house to get to the gym, weightliftinghq.com is here to help you. They're located right here in South Jersey, and they will deliver the equipment right to your house and set it up for you. You don't have to sit there and look at 20 pages of diagrams, figure out what bolt goes where. No, they're going to help you with everything from the point of purchase to delivery. Their customer service is incredible. So we're looking for bench and squat racks, kettlebells, dumbbells, cardio and fitness machines, or resistance bands, anything you need health and fitness related. It's at weightliftinghq.com. That's weightliftinghq.com. Use code radio10 for 10% off your entire order. That's radio10 for 10% off your entire order at weightliftinghq.com. 609-403-0973 on the text board to get on the conversation. Again, the breaking news that broke just the last hour, if you didn't hear, Eagles defensive coordinator Jim Schwartz, according to multiple reports, will let his contract with the Eagles expire. He will be taking a year off from football as he considers retirement after a 32-year coaching career, 28 of those in the NFL. He was the defensive coordinator of two teams that reached the Super Bowl, the Tennessee Titans back about 20 years ago, and then the Philadelphia Eagles when they won the Super Bowl back in 2017. Also, he's one of only two coaches in the last 20, head coaches in the last 20 years to lead the Detroit Lions to the postseason, the other being Jim Caldwell. Again, Jim Schwartz contemplating retirement as he will take a year off from coaching in 2021, and he will be no longer the Philadelphia Eagles defensive coordinator. So a lot to check on. Listen, I was saying at the beginning of the show, I thought the Eagles were going to possibly lose this game. Not anymore. Oh, man. I don't know. The Eagles might win this game now. Let me get double check. Did the spread change at all? Did this line move at all since this number came out? That's what I want to look at over here. The line moved half a point a couple bucks, but in Washington's favor. So it looks like the Eagles' money hasn't come in yet. Now, of course, part of that is because of the fact that the Eagles have 9 guys who are out for tomorrow night's game. But let me tell you something. This defense has played hard for the most of the year. They might come out there and just pin their ears back for Jim. Be like, this one's for Schwartz. Ooh, man. Oh, man, this is going to be interesting. I'm looking forward to this conversation on Sunday Football tomorrow night. You know, Collinsworth has some weird opinions at times about different coaches around the league, right? He's been way more complimentary of players during his year as an analyst than he has of the actual coaches in the league. I want to know what Chris Collinsworth going to have to say tomorrow night. That's going to be interesting. Let's get to more of your texts here. 609-403-0973 on the PlaySugarHouse.com text board, 609-403-0973. Jason K. May texted in earlier. Jason, I promise I get to your text. He says, Will you be sold on Jalen Hurts if he plays really well versus Washington? Well, Jason, first of all, I'm already sold on Jalen Hurts. I think that you've seen more out of Hurts with this offense in 2020 than you ever saw from Wentz. Hurts has given you offensive production that Wentz just couldn't give you. And that's what's really frustrating. The Philadelphia Eagles, since Jalen Hurts became the quarterback, have gone over 400 yards in total offense in all three starts. 413, 422, 477. With Carson Wentz at quarterback, the Eagles went over 400 total yards once all year. And that was the win over the Giants where they were lucky to win 22-21. So Carson Wentz had 13 games. 13 games. And the offense went over to 400 total yards once in 13 games. With Jalen Hurts as the starting quarterback, they went over 400 total yards all three games. So Jason and Kate May, I'm already sold on Jalen Hurts. I'm already bought in to the idea of Hurts being the quarterback. Now, will he be the starting quarterback next year? I don't know. I don't really know, because it depends on, is Carson Wentz willing to fight for his job? Is Carson Wentz still invested in being the starting quarterback of the Philadelphia Eagles? Is he willing to listen to people and try to better himself? Is he willing to go out there and do the necessary work that it takes to improve his mechanics, to improve his decision-making, to better himself? Is he genuinely willing to do that? I don't have the answer. I don't know. I think Wentz hasn't really given you a straight answer about anything this year. He gives you the cookie cutter answers, the PR recommended, suggested statements. He doesn't really give you a lot. Jalen Hurts has way more depth and substance when he does his pressures than Carson does. He still gives you some of the PC, public relations answers, but he's not as stale as Wentz is. I mean, Wentz is just, he tells you I got to do a better job. And if you ask him what he's got to do a better job at, he can't give you an answer, because at the end of the day, I don't think Wentz even knows. I don't know if Wentz fully grasps the idea that he benched himself. So as far as I'm concerned, I'm already sold on Jalen Hurts. The problem is, are the Philadelphia Eagles sold on Jalen Hurts? Howie Roseman said back in, April and May, after the NFL draft, the 2020 draft, that they didn't want to let a player like Jalen Hurts pass them by again. And there's a lot of people who worked in the Eagles organization that said that Howie Roseman and others in the organization really wanted Russell Wilson all those years ago, 8 years ago. And they passed on him, and they still regret it to this day. And that was a big reason why they drafted Jalen Hurts. Now, if you think that Jalen Hurts is anywhere close to Russell Wilson in terms of his potential, let me tell you something. You don't need Carson Wentz. If that's how you feel about Jalen Hurts, then you don't need Carson Wentz. The problem is you're stuck with that contract. And unless Wentz is willing to renegotiate the finer points of that contract, you really can't trade him. Now, we know that quarterbacks in the past, in order to get out of their current situation, have renegotiated deals before. Most recently, Nick Foles, in order for the Jags to trade him to Chicago, he basically had to restructure his deal and forfeit a huge chunk of money in order for him to be moved out of Jacksonville and go to Chicago. So we have seen it before. There are many situations, like, for example, when Alex Smith got traded from the Chiefs to Washington, there was some financial gymnastics that had to be, worked through in order for that deal to work as well. So there are situations where quarterbacks have reworked deals. And listen, if you find a way to rework Wentz's deal and trade him, that might save you from a lot of the salary cap issues that you could have this offseason. But it's up to Wentz to want to be honest with everybody and say whether he's serious about being in Philadelphia or not. If he's serious about working on his mechanics, improving his decision-making, and he wants to go into camp next year to prove that he should be the starting quarterback of this team, then I'm interested. But I'm already sold on Jalen Hurts. Jason and Kate May. The question is, are the Eagles sold on Jalen Hurts? 609-403-0973 on the PlaySugarHouse.com text board, 609-403-0973. Again, the breaking news from the last hour, Jim Schwartz will be letting his contract expire at the end of this year, and he will take a year off from football altogether as he contemplates retirement at age 54. Dan from EHT chimes in and says, Jim Schwartz doesn't really use linebackers. His scheme only utilizes 8 out of 11 players in the field. Also, I need a lot more on the resume on Hurts. I'm not sold at all. All right, a couple things, Dan. Number one, I totally respect your opinion about Hurts. You know, it's only been 3 games. So if you're not sold on him, I'm not going to hold that against you, at least personally for me. I mean, I think that that's a very rational perspective to have. You need more on the resume. You need more games under Hurts' belt. I'm fine with that. I don't think that's an extreme thing to say. As long as you give the kid a chance, Dan, EHT, then I'm good with it. As long as you look at Hurts and you say, I'm not sold, I'm not out on him. You know what I mean? As long as you're not one of these people who's on, Twitter with the eggheads and doesn't want to put their name or their likeness to anything that they say, and they sit there and they put with the fake picture and they'll go up there and they'll say, well, Hurts threw 2 interceptions versus the Cowboys, or, well, Hurts' completion percentage, and, they're just some dope who doesn't even watch the game half the time. As long as you're not like that person, I'm fine with your perspective on Hurts. I think that for a good segment of the fan base, Dan and EHT, you're not alone. I think there's a lot of people in the Eagles fan base that they need to see more of Hurts before they're convinced that he's the guy, that he could be the franchise quarterback. So I don't think that's an extreme thing to say. Like I said, my opinion is that I'm sold on Hurts because he's already done more with his offense than Carson Wentz ever did all year. And that tells me that he just may be more equipped for this team to be successful moving forward than Wentz is. I just don't know if Wentz is. I don't know what the deal with Wentz is. I don't know if it's psychological. I've called him egotistical this year because of some of his decision making. Makes you wonder that he thinks that he can make plays and throws that he really shouldn't be making at all. I don't see that from Jalen Hurts. I see him willing to throw the ball away. I see him willing to take the check down. I see that he's willing to not put the team in a position to have turnovers more often than not. The one interception versus the Cowboys, the receivers obviously ran the wrong way. When you go back and watch the game tape, the all-22 film, it was just obvious that the receiver ran the wrong way, and it was an anticipation throw, and he threw to the spot. The receiver wasn't there, and that was an interception. The other interception was his fault. You want to blame him for a couple of fumbles this year, that's fine. The one fumble, I definitely got to blame Doug Peterson more than Hurts, because in the Saints game, why are you doing a quarterback, ISO run or power run or whatever the heck that was supposed to be? Why are you putting your quarterback in a position in the fourth quarter to have to basically be the bell cow for the offense? You got a plethora of running backs from Miles Sanders to Boston Scott to Corey Clement to Jordan Howard. Run one of those guys. Heck, do a full house backfield, okay? With Goddard and a running back and Hurts and another back and just power running. I don't care. Just don't expect your quarterback. This isn't Army, okay? This isn't Army versus West Virginia yesterday in the Liberty Bowl. The quarterback shouldn't be, the primary ball handler burning up clock in the fourth quarter. Hurts' success as a running quarterback is on either design runs that are either counters or misdirections, or it's him having to create with his feet when the play falls apart and he has to. So, the other point that Dan made is that Schwartz doesn't use linebackers. The scheme only utilizes 8 out of 11 players. So that's not true, Dan. So when you look at Schwartz's scheme, Schwartz's scheme is built on the wide nine principle, but it's a little more evolved than that. When you break it down, whether it was he was in Tennessee or Detroit or Buffalo or now in Philadelphia, his defense is built on the idea that we are going to stop you from running the ball, and we're going to force you to pass your way to win the game. We're going to bend but don't break, and we're going to send our best blitzers after you. So, whoever the top defensive lineman, whether it was like a Ndamukong Suh in Detroit, whether it was a guy like, a Javon Curse, and then later he had Jason Babin for a couple of years, or, Albert Hainsworth with Tennessee. Off the top of my head, I don't remember who the top guy was in Buffalo. I have to double check that real quick. But he did have one guy who was really good in Buffalo. Just give me a hot second. I'll pull it up. As soon as I'm going to see it, I'm going to be frustrated with myself because I feel like I should remember some of these guys. But that's right. Jerry Hughes from TCU and Mario Williams. They were both coming off the edge. They were both getting double-digit quarterback hits that year, and they both were tied for the team lead in sacks. So, Hughes and Williams coming off the edge. Everywhere he's been, he's had guys who can get after the quarterback. And when you think about what Schwartz's defense did, like I said, in Buffalo that 1 year, they were incredible. I mean, they were just monsters. Williams had 14.5 sacks. Hughes had 10 sacks. They were among the league leaders in quarterback hits, both of them. So Schwartz's defense is not that it doesn't use the linebackers, but the defense is principled on we are going to ask our defensive linemen to fill the void of the pass rush. And we're going to ask our linebackers to stop the run and drop back in coverage. And he needs linebackers who are able to do both. So like a Stephen Tulloch for a few years in Detroit, or like a Keith Bullock over there in Tennessee. Nigel Bradham for a couple of years in Philadelphia. He needs those two-way linebackers. The problem is that when Philadelphia lost guys like Jordan Hicks to free agency, Nigel Bradham because of injuries, then free agency, they never really replaced those guys. They didn't really do anything to make the team better. They just said, well, you got Nate Gary. And it's like, Nate Gary? Really? You're telling me that we lost Jordan Hicks and we got Nate Gary? Oh, we got you Duke Riley. You got me Duke Riley. Really? Well, we drafted Davion Taylor. He's not even ready to play in the NFL. So it's not that Schwartz doesn't use linebackers. It's that Schwartz was given a team that didn't prioritize linebackers, and so he had to minimize the use of the linebackers to cover up for that flaw. And that's why a lot of times Malcolm Jenkins was like a box safety. He was actually many times like the dime linebacker or the or one of the two nickel linebackers. A lot of times they would have one safety or two safeties back behind Jenkins, and then they would go out there and have Jenkins playing near the line because Schwartz couldn't trust his linebackers. He had to have Malcolm Jenkins do that on third down. So don't confuse the roster the Eagles gave Schwartz with how he had to compensate for the roster he was given. Again, Jim Schwartz, according to NFL Network and ESPN.com, will be letting his contract expire at the end of this year, take a year off from coaching in 2021 as he contemplates retirement. We'll get to more of your text a little bit later in the show, 609-403-0973. Still to come as well. About 25 minutes from now, I'll give you my picks for this Saturday. Brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. Make sure you download the FanDuel Sportsbook in New Jersey and PA and use my promo code Hennig. That's Hennig for opportunities for great bonuses, odds boosts, and more with FanDuel Sportsbook. Promo code Hennig, Hennig. Speaking of picks, coming up next, I didn't expect Ohio State to win, but they did. How did they do it, and how will they look against Alabama? We'll get into that with Adam Rittenberg coming up next here on Sports Bash Saturday on 97.3 ESPN FM and the 97.3 ESPN mobile app powered by First Bank of Seattle City.
This is Sports Bash Saturday with Josh Hennig, live from the Matt Blatt Kia Studios. Here's Josh Hennig.
Josh Hennig here, Sports Bash Saturday, 97.3 ESPN, the College Football National Championship. It's set. Most people believed Alabama would be there, but I don't know, maybe people thought Ohio State would be there after a huge win last night. Adam Rittenberg, ESPN college football reporter, joins us right now on the Boardwalk Kind of Hotline to talk more about it on 97.3 ESPN. Adam, how you doing this day after?
Doing great. How you doing?
Doing pretty good. So let's first start with the Ohio State thing, because I was just so impressed. Like, I knew Justin Fields was phenomenal. I didn't need to watch that game to know what kind of talent he is. But the way Ohio State's offensive line played, the way the defense limited Clemson, Sermon just turning into basically Ezekiel Elliott from a few years ago, it feels like. The way everybody else around Fields plays, that's what impressed me last night.
Sure, although there's a lot to say about Justin Fields. And I mean, the thing is, they always had these ingredients. They just hadn't put them together in the way that they did on the stage that they did last night. And this is one of the nation's best offensive lines. I mean, they're filled with future NFL players. They're very, very well coached. The Trey Sermon thing has really been a surprise. I mean, was very ordinary in his first 4 games after transferring from Oklahoma, and then beginning with the Michigan State game, he's been outstanding and obviously huge in both the Big Ten championship and then the semifinal last night. So, with Master Teague not 100% out of the game, obviously, we'll see his status for the national championship. Trey Sermon has been a huge, huge part of this run that Ohio State's hoping to culminate with its first national title since 2014.
This Trey Sermon story is phenomenal to me, Adam, because he was at Oklahoma. He transferred, but if he would have stayed at Oklahoma, he'd probably been the starter there. So one guy transferring to Ohio State, if they don't have him, they might not beat Northwestern. I mean, it feels like one guy completely changed the trajectory for 3 different schools this year. Yeah,
I mean, Oklahoma still obviously had a great season. They won the Big 12. Rhamondre Stevenson had a great year after he got off his suspension. So they were fine. But Ohio State really needed this. They lost J.K. Dobbins, who, is just an outstanding college player. And I don't think was even fully appreciated what he was able to do for the Buckeye offense nationally. So there was a void there. And obviously Master Teague is a nice young back, but what Trey Sermon has done has been just remarkable. And you're right. I mean, as bad as Justin Fields was in the Big Ten championship, they may not win that game without Trey Sermon. And then complementing a great Justin Fields in the semifinal is just huge. And then again, you get to give a lot of credit to the offensive line. Ohio State has some real depth at tight end. They're great blockers. You saw last night that they're also effective as receivers catching passes. And so it's been definitely one of the more surprising stories this year for the Buckeyes.
Adam Rittenberg joining us here on the Boardwalk Kind of Hotline on 97.3 ESPN. You can follow on Twitter at ESPN Rittenberg for all your college football insight and analysis. Adam, when you think about also the game last night, we'll get to Alabama in a moment, but I felt like Clemson, it just seemed like they ran out of steam at certain points. It just felt like Ohio State, from beginning to end, it just felt like they believed they were going to win, and Clemson just took a little bit too long to figure out how to keep up.
Well, again, I think this is the defense that ACC coaches had talked to me about all year, having concerns, young, maybe a lack of star power, at least compared to the previous Clemson defenses. Obviously, losing James Skalski, their leader, to the targeting penalty was a big impact. He made a huge impact. And you saw how Clemson struggled with Notre Dame, a less talented offense, without Skalski and Tyler Davis and a couple other guys in the first Notre Dame game. And then you saw how much better they were in the second Notre Dame game. And so even though Ohio State was already moving the ball at that point, that was a big moment. And, again, I think Clemson's going to be very good on defense, but it's just not the unit we saw last year. It's not the unit we saw a few years ago with all those NFL players, those first-round picks. And so, again, still a lot of talent. Brent Venables is outstanding as their coordinator. But I think, again, this sort of validated what I've been hearing most of the season from coaches in the ACC, but something that I was reconsidering after watching Clemson in the ACC championship against Notre Dame.
Now, of course, the matchup is going to be January 11th, Ohio State versus Alabama. Folks can hear the game right here on 97.3 ESPN that night. And Adam, Alabama looked like Alabama yesterday. I mean, they were dominant. They had everything going for them. Patrick Surtain locked down an entire side of the field on defense. Offensively, Smith was out there doing what he's been doing all year. Was it business as usual for Alabama yesterday?
It was, although I would say that their defense, again, after a poor performance against Florida, a much more talented Florida offense in the SEC championship, I like the way that they responded. Notre Dame's running game, which is sort of their bread and butter, wasn't really a factor, and Notre Dame couldn't really attack downfield. I mean, they essentially held them to 7 points. The last touchdown was in the closing minutes. And again, Mac Jones, his development as a guy that a lot of people just didn't think was an elite player has been remarkable. He deserves a ton of credit. I mean, Justin Fields was probably the best quarterback in college football last night, but Mac Jones had 4 touchdowns and 5 incompletions in that ball game. Now, his offensive line is just outstanding. They're clearly the best in college football. And with Devontae Smith and that receiving core, Billingsley was a guy that stepped up for them. Obviously, John Mechie, Najee Harris had 4 receptions. So he's got a lot of good players to attack to, but just really, really impressed with what we've seen out of the Heisman finalist in Mac Jones. And so, I think, you have 2 teams that have tremendous confidence on offense. You have 2 teams that can stretch the field big time, 2 really good sets of receivers, 2 really good offensive lines, and then 2 defenses that seem to be playing better at the right time, but aren't elite units. I think both can be vulnerable, and we've seen it at times this season. Probably will come down to which defense steps up on January 11th.
Speaking of the defenses stepping up, we know that the 2 games, you mentioned the one that Alabama's defense had some trouble with, the Florida game, for example, and then earlier in the year in Ole Miss. So can Ohio State bring the kind of offense to the table in the same way that Florida and Ole Miss were able to do to Alabama?
Yeah, I think after watching them last night, the answer is yes. Now, the question will be, how serious are Justin Fields' injuries? One thing that was interesting, and I asked Justin after the game last night, did he get a diagnosis? And he said no definitive diagnosis. Ryan Day, the head coach, said the same thing. They basically gave him some shots and sent him back on the field. So hopefully he doesn't have broken ribs or something that would impair him for a game that's a little bit over a week from now. But, I mean, yeah, you watch Ohio State's offense last night. They absolutely are more dangerous than what we saw from Notre Dame. They absolutely can score on Alabama. But I also have been impressed with the improvement that we've seen, really other than the SEC championship. I think Alabama's defense was slowly trending in the right direction. But, there's no Chase Young out there. Obviously, Patrick Surtain is a terrific corner. I think both of these defenses, although Ohio State's defensive line really impressed me last night, are going to give up points. So it's just who can create takeaways, who can create key stops in the fourth quarter. That's probably what it's going to come down to.
ESPN's Adam Rittenberg joining us here on the Boardwalk kind of hotline on 97.3 ESPN. Again, you can follow him on Twitter at ESPN Rittenberg for all your college football news and analysis. I'll check out all of his work at ESPN.com and on ESPN+. Adam, I want to ask you also about the 2 other games real quick yesterday. Cincinnati playing Georgia real close. Georgia had to get a field goal at the end. Northwestern getting that win over Auburn. Do we take anything from the fact that 2 SEC teams were played that well against by 2 teams that were supposedly supposed to be inferior?
Well, Northwestern was favored. I mean, again, I think we have to really look at the SEC love a little bit, okay? Alabama's in a class of its own. We'll see about Texas A&M. I think they're really good. It's not that great of a league other than that. It just isn't. I mean, what did you see this year that makes you think otherwise? Northwestern was favored. Cincinnati, I think most of us thought was an equal team to Georgia and should have won the game. They screwed up their clock management at the end. So, again, not surprised that Northwestern won it all. Auburn was a 6-4 team that fired its coach, had some opt-outs. There's talent there, but Northwestern was better. And then Cincinnati, again, I just feel terrible for them because they played their hearts out. They had too many penalties, and they managed the clock terribly at the end. Otherwise, they get a win over Georgia. I mean, again, Georgia's nice team, a lot of talent, got blown out by Alabama, got blown out by Florida, a Florida team that that ended up losing, 4 games. So just not that impressed with the SEC this year. I don't know if any league has tremendous depth, but I just don't think it's been a great year in the SEC. I don't know if you feel otherwise.
Oh, I definitely feel like that. I thought that Northwestern was going to win all along. I was just curious to know because I felt like while I'm watching the game and I'm consuming, social media, it just seemed like there were way more people who were surprised by those outcomes. I'm sitting there thinking, listen, if you would have watched Northwestern and Cincinnati all year, both those teams hung their hats on playing defense. So to me, I personally wasn't too surprised, but I felt like there were a lot of people out there. Maybe there were a lot of people who didn't watch enough outside the SEC. They didn't realize that Auburn going up against a team like Northwestern was going to have to meet them physically.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's part of it. And I think there's also just this default mentality in college football that, when Michigan and Penn State are down, and Northwestern and Indiana and Iowa are up, then something's wrong with the Big Ten. It's just not true. The Big Ten has, in my view, 4 legitimate top 15 teams this year. They just don't happen to be named Michigan, Penn State, Wisconsin, Nebraska, whoever you're going to throw in there, brand name X. They're Iowa, Northwestern, and Indiana. They're all really, really good teams. And to your point, if people had watched them all year, they shouldn't be surprised. Same with Cincinnati. Cincinnati's just outstanding. I mean, their defense is terrific. They do enough offensively. The thing that surprised me about them was the penalties. I think 11 penalties. It's got to be hard to beat a team like Georgia with that talent, even though they're not an elite team, with that many penalties when you're a group of 5. That was just disappointing. And certainly just a game that I think is going to live with Cincinnati for a while, because I thought they were the better team most of the way, had a great game plan, but just didn't execute enough in terms of limiting mistakes and then ultimately managing the game at the end.
Absolutely. It's going to be interesting to see what Luke Fickell does with that program moving forward. Before I let you go, Adam, today the Fiesta Bowl and the Orange Bowl, Oregon versus Iowa State, Texas A&M versus North Carolina. Which of those 2 matchups are you looking forward to most and why?
Yeah, I think with North Carolina's opt-out and the way Texas A&M is playing, that should be a fairly comfortable win for the Aggies. So I'm going to go with the Fiesta Bowl. Again, 2 teams, you look at the records, 4-2 and 8-3, it doesn't get you too excited, but I think you got 2 quarterbacks here from the state of Arizona going against one another in Tyler Shuck and Brock Purdy. They actually trained together, played 8th grade baseball together, growing up about 5 miles from one another. So excited to watch them. Excited to watch 2 pretty good defenses. Iowa State's defense is sort of mimicked around the country what they've done there under John Haycock. And then Oregon's defense, really talented unit under Andy Avalos, who's a candidate for the Boise State head coaching job. A lot of high-level talent on that side of the ball, and they did a really nice job against USC in the Pac-12 championship. So, yeah, I think this will be a close game, fun to watch to see if Iowa State at number 10 can cap what's been an unbelievable season and an unbelievable rise under Matt Campbell for a program where, again, let's face it, they have a lot of things working against them, but he's really taken them to a new level.
Yeah, you mentioned Campbell as well. Campbell versus Cristobal, 2 of the better recruiters in the country going head-to-head. I mean, those are 2 guys that you may even want to see throw down themselves. I mean, those are some pretty tough-minded dudes, right, Adam?
Yeah, I don't think anybody wants to throw down with Mario, former offensive lineman. He's still in pretty good shape. Matt's a tough guy as well, and a little bit different approaches, but certainly in terms of development, I think there's few guys that are better than Matt Campbell and what he's done in terms of constructing that Iowa State program and being really creative in recruiting. And then you mentioned Mario has long been one of the nation's best recruiters, and you're seeing what he's done at Oregon, top 10 class after top 10 class. They've done so well in California. They've gotten players from other areas. There's not that much local talent in the state, and so you have to really branch out. And, it's nice to see him with a long-term extension at Oregon and having a chance now for 3 consecutive Pac-12 championships next year. And then obviously the next step for Oregon clearly is getting into the college football playoff.
He's Adam Rittenberg, ESPN.com, ESPN Plus. Check out all of his work, senior writer and reporter on college football. And as all guests, he appeared today on the Boardwalk kind of hotline. You can follow him on Twitter at ESPN Rittenberg. Adam, appreciate the time and the insights.
All right, thanks, Josh. Happy New Year.
And, of course, more breaking news breaks as I'm talking to Adam because you have Tom Herman being fired by Texas. I didn't get a chance to ask him about that, but my goodness, I mean, that's a huge buyout. That's now Auburn and Texas, both firing head coaches with tens of millions of dollars they got to pay them to go away. And then they're going to hire a new coach? Oh, man. I mean, what is going on with these college football coaches? I mean, man. Kind of makes you wonder if you went into the wrong profession. These coaches are being fired and told to go away. Tens of millions of dollars. Whew. Josh Hennig here on 97.3 ESPN, the 1 o'clock hour Sports Bash Saturday, being brought to you by weightliftinghq.com. Use the code RADIO10 at checkout for 10% off your entire order. Weightliftinghq.com, located right here in South Jersey, will deliver the equipment right to your home and help you get it all set up. The best customer service you can find from the point of sale to delivery and everything in between at weightliftinghq.com. Squat and bench press, bench and squat racks, kettlebells, dumbbells, resistance bands, cardio and fitness machines, whatever you need to meet your health and fitness goals. weightliftinghq.com is there for you. Remember code RADIO10, check out for 10% off your entire order. Final segment of the show coming up next. We'll check back on the text board at 609-403-0973, plus my sports picks for another Saturday. We'll update the overall record and also give you 4 picks for the weekend, presented by FanDuel Sportsbook here on 97.3 ESPN FM and the 97.3 ESPN mobile app, powered by First Bank of Sea City.
This is Sports Bash Saturday with Josh Hennig, live from the Matt Blatt Kia Studios. Here's Josh Hennig.
Wrapping up Sports Bash Saturday. Happy New Year to all of you out there. If you all had a good holiday, safe holiday, safe on multiple fronts. Don't forget, coming up, a quadruple header of sports today on 97.3 ESPN. College basketball at the top of the hour, Rutgers versus Iowa, a top 25 matchup in college basketball, followed by the Fiesta Bowl at 4 o'clock, Oregon versus Iowa State. And then Sixers basketball at 7 p.m. right here on 97.3 ESPN. Sixers versus the Hornets, followed by the Orange Bowl in progress, Texas A&M versus North Carolina. We'll get to my picks in just a moment for another Saturday here. Of course, my picks being brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. Use the promo code Hennig. That's Hennig. Promo code Hennig when you sign up for FanDuel Sportsbook for exclusive boosts, exclusive deals, stuff like same game parlays. You can't do that with any other sportsbook except with FanDuel Sportsbook. Plus, of course, if you took my advice this week, we had a huge winner. If you would have bet $5, you could have won $125 on Alabama winning this week. So far, my picks since May of this year, combined of college football, NFL, UFC, NBA, you're looking at a 64% win rate. So we'll try to help you all win a little bit more coming up in just a moment. We'll get to your text messages as well before we get out of here. 609-403-0973. 609-403-0973. Don't forget Jim Schwartz. It looks like he is going to be basically leaving on his own terms. Basically, according to reports, you go check out 97.3 ESPN.com, the 97.3 ESPN mobile. Apparently, Jim Schwartz has had some serious health complications recently as well. That's detailed in the report at 97.3 ESPN.com. So this is more than just, maybe he's just tired of coaching. Maybe his body and mind are both just worn down. Maybe it's all taking a toll on him. So more details over at 97.3 ESPN.com, the 97.3 ESPN will have Jim Schwartz will let his contract retire at the end of the year. He will take a year off from football altogether and contemplate retirement after 28 years of coaching in the NFL at age 54. Not a bad career, though. Won a ring with the Eagles. Almost won a ring with the Tennessee Titans versus the Rams. Remember, that Titans team was one of the only teams to hold the Rams down offensively that year. So he's had some pretty good defense. He's done a pretty good job in the NFL. Dan from EHT follows up and says, I am such a Schwartz basher, but the Eagles would not have a title without him. I'm glad he is going out like this and not being fired. Listen, Dan, and I'm glad you said that because I wish more Eagle fans had that sentiment, the idea that, look, this guy helped get you a ring. Yeah, his defense didn't perform in the Super Bowl, but that defense got you to the Super Bowl. The defense won you the Falcons game. The defense was a major catalyst in the Vikings win in the NFC Championship game that year. When Nick Foles had to come in, the pressure wasn't all on Foles to finish out that regular season because that defense was so good all year long. And you could argue that, look, that defense, they held the Saints in check in 2018. If Alshon Jeffrey just catches that ball, the Eagles are back in the NFC Championship game. That defense shut down Russell Wilson and the Seahawks offense. It's just that Carson Wentz got concussed and Josh McCown was playing with a torn hamstring. That's why he didn't win the Seahawks game. So the defense overall has done its job under Jim Schwartz. But you know what? It's good that he's going out on his terms, and that's why one of my picks for tomorrow. I wasn't planning on going this at all. I had this is a last minute write-in. I'm going the Eagles plus 3.5. I really am. I can't believe I'm doing it, but I think this Eagles game is close tomorrow. I really do. I really think that there's a strong possibility that the Eagles might not just cover, they might win the game. Because anytime a coach is retiring, players get up for that guy. It doesn't matter if it's college, it doesn't matter if it's NFL, it doesn't matter what sport it is. Players play for coaches or they don't play for coaches. You're either a coach who can get your players to get up for you or you're not. And I feel like Jim Schwartz is the guy the players seem to play for. They respect him. Brandon Graham has talked very well of him over the years. A lot of the Eagles defensive players think very highly of Schwartz. They know that he has their back. He's taken the bullets for some of their horrible performances at times. Listen, just this year, Brandon Graham played horrible versus the Rams. And he took all the blame for it. And Brandon Graham spoke out how much he loved Jim Schwartz for doing that. There have been times that Jim Schwartz has covered for Jalen Mills. There's been times that Schwartz has covered for a lot of these guys when they don't have a good game. And the players love him for that. They respect him for that. They buy into him. So it doesn't matter if it's Alex Smith or Taylor Heineke out there tomorrow. They better watch out. Because even with 9 players ruled out for this game tomorrow, there's no Fletcher Cox. There's no Duke Riley. There's no Sean Bradley. The linebackers are going to be basically a bunch of nobodies out there with Alex Singleton. But I expect this defense to go out there and go after Washington and give it all they got. This is an opportunity for the Eagles to not just take Washington out of the postseason, but give their coach one more win before it's all said and done. So I'm going Eagles plus 2. The other game I'm going with is on 97.3 ESPN tomorrow. We are going to have a NFC East all day tomorrow. Giants, Cowboys at 2:30. Coverage begins. Eagles, Washington, 7 p.m. right here on 97.3 ESPN. I'm going Cowboys versus Giants over 44.5. The Giants have allowed 24.3 points per game in their last 3 games. They're on a 3-game losing streak, and their defense is getting wrecked. That defense was doing so well, and they just haven't been able to keep up ever since. Meanwhile, Dallas's offense has won 3 straight over the same stretch, and their offense is averaging 36 points per game. We know Dallas's defense isn't very good. We know the Giants' defense has been struggling. We know that Dallas's offense has been putting up points. We know the Giants, mathematically, if they win the game, they can win the NFC East. I expect this to be a high-scoring, competitive game. You know, maybe one of those, 35-28 Cowboys winning kind of games is kind of what I would expect to happen out there. Maybe even 35-24, whatever the thing is. Guess what? 35-21 Cowboys win. That's over 44.5. You do the math. 2 other games I'll give you for you right now. A couple NBA games. Been dabbling back into the NBA since that got back on track. Kings Rockets today at 5 o'clock. 233.5 seems like a high number. Did you know that the Rockets have hit the over in every game this season? That's right. The Houston Rockets have hit the over every game this year. Also, statistically, they have one of the worst defenses in the entire NBA. Kings Rockets over 233.5. And the other game, Cavs versus Hawks over 229. Both teams hit the over 2 of their last 4 games, and both teams have allowed opponents to score over 100 points in 2 of their last 3 games. And actually, Cavs have done it 3 straight games. Hawks have 2 of the last 3. So I expect those 2 to be high-scoring games. So little NFL, little NBA for your sports weekend. And those picks are brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook for users in New Jersey and PA. Use the promo code Hennig when you sign up for great added bonuses, great boosts. You can get same-game parlays with FanDuel. It's a fun sports betting app. It's not archaic like certain sports books. No, it's streamlined, easy to use, Android, Apple, whatever device you're using, or you can use it on your computer. Just go to sportsbook.fanduel.com or download the FanDuel Sportsbook app. Use the promo code HENNIG when you sign up. Let them know I sent you. All right, wrapping up the show. Busy sports weekend here on 97.3 ESPN. Of course, we got Rutgers versus Iowa. That should be a high-scoring game coming up next. Iowa's got no defense. Rutgers can score pretty high points this year. 2 of the top 25 teams in the country in the Big Ten going head-to-head. Big Ten action coming up here. Rutgers, Iowa, right next on 97.3 ESPN, followed by the Fiesta Bowl, Oregon versus Iowa State at 4. Sixers basketball at 7 o'clock. Sixers versus the Hornets today on 97.3 ESPN. And then the Orange Bowl in progress, North Carolina versus Texas A&M. The last college football weekend of the year. The final NFL regular season weekend of the year. All here right on 97.3 ESPN. Cowboys versus Giants tomorrow at 12:30. Before that, Billy Schwein in the locker room. I'm Josh Hennig. Have a great day, everybody.